Welcome to Unemployed and Afraid, a podcast that explores the glorious mess of building your own business with the people doing it. I'm your host and fellow business builder, Kim Curtin. Thank you for being here. Let's get into some good, honest, small business chat. From big cities to remote living, corporate to business, big business to rebuilding from the ground up, this story you're about to hear has it all for you. Lucy Werner, the founder of Hype Yourself, which you'll hear more about soon, is here for the growth of small businesses. Yes, we're here for that, with quality PR as her vehicle and education topic of choice. And there's just so many reasons you're going to love this episode. In it, you're going to hear about how to move from expert to educator, the role where you live plays in what business you can build, building around a growing family, all things Substack, which I'm very much enjoying at the moment, the smoke and mirrors behind so many big businesses and big accounts. I put big in quotations there if you couldn't tell by my voice, why growth doesn't always need to be the priority, and finding your motivational why. And make sure you stick around right to the end for some brilliant advice on learning to love where you are and some quality banter. Like me, you want to hear from Lucy all day long. Let's get into it. I'm here with Lucy Werner, founder of the top 50 business newsletter called Hype Yourself, which I can see in the background of her video, which I just love. Plus, she's author of the two best-selling books, Hype Yourself and Brand Yourself. And she is generally doing work that, on behalf of solopreneurs, small business owners, and founders everywhere, we're eternally grateful for. She's helping founders get famous. One of the key ways she does this is by writing about self-promotion and creative living for her Substack publication with over 8,000 subscribers. She's taught hundreds of entrepreneurs through workshops, resources, and courses for creative spaces like The Future, Bayes Business School, Courier Magazine, and the University of Arts in London. And she's a global Adobe Express ambassador and Domestika instructor. Lucy has over 20 years of communications experience. A little peek inside her trophy cabinet reveals she's been listed in Alt Marketing Power 100, The Dot's Rising Stars, and Startup Magazine's Female Founders to Watch. I first heard Lucy chat on one of my own favorite podcasts called Everyone Hates Marketers. And it was one of those pod episodes where I just found myself on multiple occasions skipping back so I could hear the gems that she was dropping over and over again. She is absolutely full of gems. We know, listener, that being in business for yourself is damn hard, but equally worth it. And I have so much love for those people helping us through it with their own business adventures. So clearly, I'm very excited to hear her story. Lucy, welcome to Unemployed and Afraid.
Kim, thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, pleasure is all mine. Honestly, I could have listened to that podcast back again, but rather than that, I was like, nah, I just have to ask her some of these questions myself.
Let's do it. What do you need to know?
Well, firstly, tell me, where in the world are you joining me from right now?
So I'm actually in rural France. I moved out here 2 and a bit years ago. The co-founder of my children is French. So he has the language. So I am an aspiring French speaker. I would say the level I'm at now, you would call advanced beginner. But I used to be based in London in England before that.
Have you had any hairy moments lately trying to language barrier?
Nothing as dramatic to report as I used to get. There was definitely a moment when I first came out here where I thought I was doing really well with the neighbor, and he asked what the name of the dog was. So I was tickling my dog and going, "Hello, hello, hello," and tickling the dog's ear, like you do enthusiastically when your dog's there. And then about a week later, he ran into my husband and said, "Oh, I met your wife, Arlo."
Oh, dear.
Somehow I'd managed to miss he was actually asking me what my own name was, and it was the dog's. But since then, we haven't had anything too horrific.
Oh, brilliant. I love that. So speaking of your co-founder of your children, how do you think he might describe you?
I don't think he calls me the co-founder of his children. He actually tends to call me his partner in crime. We used to work together, but he's actually left me and the business, which was good for me because it meant I could pivot to work in-house for somebody else. But he's working remotely for a tech company from our office also in the south of France.
Wow, what a special lifestyle to build a new life together. That's really
quite weird. It's quite weird, but it's fun.
Before you were building Hype Yourself, before you were dedicating so much time to helping founders get themselves out there and do some proper self-promotion, what were you doing? How did you end up here?
So I've always worked in PR agencies. I started in work experience at 17 and literally didn't look back. Like I was ready to not go to university. Like I loved it so much. And then I did a mixture in London of working in the PR teams of ad agencies. And then I worked in big global PR agencies, and I was working for a lot of creative agencies, a lot of household brands. And then I think by the end, I got quite disillusioned because I was kind of working on all the bad stuff like gambling, alcohol, e-cigarettes, all the things that you're like, oh, that was not the dream when I started. And I left to set up my own boutique consultancy. And to be honest, I didn't really leave to set up my own boutique consultancy. I left because I was sort of at that age, I was just around sort of 30. I was meeting a lot more people who were entrepreneurs. They were setting up their own businesses, their own something in the retail space, maybe, or a service based business. And they had no idea how to tap into PR. And I just thought, gosh, you shouldn't have to need thousands a month to be on a retainer and be like the smallest fish in a big agency. I want to try and make it affordable for them as possible. So I accidentally grew an agency and then was taking mentorship to like grow it so I could scale it and sell it. And part of growing that agency, I was back on the shop floor a bit, as you are when you start out. And I was having to sell back into the media. And I hadn't done that for quite a long time because I'd got so senior in agency land. I was more like running teams and pushing numbers around spreadsheets and creating PowerPoints. So I started buying PR books, and none of them were written by people in PR. Like in the UK, at least, it's like 66% female-led industry, and there were hardly any women writing PR books. Most of them were written by men who were journalists turned PR experts. And I don't have anything against journalists turned PR experts, but essentially they are only teaching you one strand of PR, which is publicity, like getting into a newspaper or a magazine. Whereas from my big agency experience, I knew there was so much other stuff that you needed to be thinking about and to be aligned with your strategy. So I started thinking, maybe I need to write that book, one, to kind of rep the women, and two, to actually educate small business owners how they could be doing it for themselves if they don't even have the money to work with me. So the kind of idea of doing that DIY support started off really in probably like 2018, 2019. And then the first book came out 2020. And that was when I started to try and introduce more DIY services. But it was only really when I came out to France and my husband was like, I'm going to leave the business, that I had the confidence to make that full flip.
What's the process like in even starting to be able to get all of those years of experience into a book format?
I think part of what was helpful is I, at that time, had decided I was going to raise my own profile because as an agency owner, I wasn't. It was just word of mouth, like for a lot of us. So I was just accruing work on the results and I was only sharing the results of the agency. I didn't really show myself at all. So when I decided I'm going to raise my own profile to see if I can get paid as a speaker or get paid to teach workshops to run us alongside the book, I started off testing for free as a way to get better at it and to learn. And so I started to see a pattern of what people would ask me or what they were struggling with. And I think a lot of good content is actually dispelling myths. So everybody wanted to know, how do I write a press release? How do I get into press? And I was, I just want to say to them, don't write a press release. I hate them. And here's some other things that you could be doing that if your main goal is to get sales, might work a lot harder for you than getting into press. So that was kind of the premise. And also, I guess from my agency experience, we would never just start promoting a client. There would always be a bit of a strategy session, a bit of a media list building, putting the press toolkit together. So it was really condensing down the process that I'd worked with clients for years.
It's amazing when we are able to pull back a little bit and start to put the knowledge into a process that we're like, oh, it's actually so much simpler than we realize. Like when we're in the thick of just like chaos going everywhere, I know so many small business owners, you're often retrofitting your processes to go like, how the fuck do I do my business? Like what even happens here? And then when you break it down, you're like, oh, that's actually quite teachable. That is something that's quite scalable. And that's something that I can do. I mean, that must have been quite fulfilling to look back at it and go, this is how, and make it something that could work for you while you weren't always working actively on it.
Yeah, I think for me, it was definitely setting the actions and the accountability piece. And that was probably the biggest education I had when it came to teaching is typically educators, if they're starting out for the first time, like an expert turned educator, there can be this risk that they just bombard you with information and then you don't know how to apply it. So actually giving that space to force people to do the work for themselves, I think's the most important teaching method.
So, running an agency and then building a personal brand and a profile in market and taking on unpaid opportunities as well through that to develop confidence and all of those things. It sounds like quite a lot to have on the go to juggle at one time. How did you work through that?
So there was a bit of a shift. I had the agency. And then after my first child was born, I did the inevitable, oh, I can't really run this business in the same way with a young baby. And I actually completely remodeled the agency. So instead of having retained clients, I started to work on projects. And that meant I could scale up and down for the projects. And I knew a lot better how much time I had. I didn't have the same team management as I did when I had full-time staff and a whole team of freelancers. It would just be, this is what we need to do this week. And I could kind of lead them to get on with it a bit more. So it was a lot easier. Also at that time, the co-founder of my children had got made redundant from his job. So he was on gardening leave. So he was taking over a lot of childcare for me. So that gave me the time to write the book and develop those other skills at the same time. So really, I wouldn't have been able to have done it if I didn't have had him supporting in the background.
The unsung heroes of so many businesses are those people, the partners and the family members that just step up to help us do something that's pretty hard.
He's the original Travis Kelce.
Is he going to be on stage in that ridiculous outfit? Like very relevant to socials right now.
He loves a ridiculous outfit and he loves being center stage now. So yeah, for sure.
Oh, I never knew the name Travis Kelce until, never thought about football. And
In the last week. But that is because I saw a trend article in the press yesterday talking about the rise of the hype man. And I was thinking, oh, I actually had my own hype man for quite a long time.
I love that rise of the hype, and now that is a trend I can get well and truly behind. So, how did it feel for you to change your business in this way, to start to create thoughts? And as so many people who are, crafting the written word in whatever format, or crafting audio or content of any kind, it's a bit of a shift in gears than working for clients. How has that process been for you?
It was a very gradual process. Like it wasn't an overnight flicking of a switch for sure. And I don't think I would have done it unless we had relocated, because obviously before we were in the city, we had a much higher cost of living. And then when we came out here, we reduced our mortgage payments. We didn't have the same demands that we had in London. And then I also got pregnant again, which I always find whenever I've had a pregnancy, I've had a business pivot in some way. And this time I was like, okay, this is definitely going to be my last one. So I'm actually going to take a break. And so I worked my little socks off, as I did as much as I could until the baby came, to the point that I actually was teaching for the future as I was going into like my waters broke and I carried on teaching. And then thought I need to stop. I had another one lined up for the next morning and I was like, I don't think I'm going to make that one. Had to pull out of that one. So I worked right up until the end. And then I decided to essentially take 3 months off social media completely, which doesn't sound like very long, but when you are an online business owner, like when you're a service provider and you're used to being online every day, it felt like a really long time. And that actually gave me the headspace to not get distracted by my peers and what everybody else was doing. Because in my second pregnancy, that was in kind of just before and then moving into the pandemic period when it was like the online course boom. And I kept seeing everybody doing online PR courses and thinking, I should do an online PR course because everybody else seems to be making this really successful. But it never felt quite the right fit for me. I couldn't get it, just wasn't working in the right way. So to be honest, I didn't think, oh, I'm going to set out doing a PR membership. And actually the very kooky side of it is I did a 30-minute session with an intuitive reader. And she said to me, you're going to launch a membership. And I said, no, I'm not. I hate the idea of a membership. And she said, no, it's not going to look like what you think it looks like. but it is going to be a membership and it's going to be really easy for you. And I think I did have this idea in my head of like an online membership and you needing to get a platform and all of these, it was going to take loads of my time and I didn't have it. And actually, I just was spending a fortune on MailChimp and a fortune hosting these online courses on Thinkific. And I just thought, right, let's cut that because I can't afford to keep those costs going when I'm not working at all. And I'd been practicing last year, testing out writing on Medium. So I kind of was finding my feet in private, really, because I had no audience there to just test out articles. I didn't really tell anyone I was writing there. I was just setting writing challenges for myself to see how long it would take me to put an article together, what sort of articles were resonating, what topics were resonating. And it was actually really encouraging because I started to share a little bit more of my own business journey of what I've learned. And that was the stuff that started to resonate more with the audience over there than just the straight how to write a press release stuff. So I thought, right, I'm going to move my MailChimp list over to Substack and I'm just going to start writing there. But I didn't really understand it as a platform. So I went to a free talk with the head of partnerships in the UK. And it was an hour intro into like, here's how to set up your newsletter. Here's how you tell your old audience, like all these sorts of things. And she said, turn on paid immediately, because when you're at the beginning of your journey, your existing audience will want to support you. Whereas if you turn on paid later on, they're used to getting that content from you. They're not going to want to pay. And it was like at school, I was given a pencil that said, say no to strangers. And I was like, okay, I got the memo. And when Farah said, turn on paid, I was like, okay. Like, it was like a message from the divine. I was like, okay, yeah, this is what I'm doing. Farah says to do that. I'm doing that. So I wrote a list of what I would write on top of my free monthly, told my old audience, I'm going to start writing stuff over here. This is the pilot price. If you want to come, sent it out. And I got over 100 paid from my old audience in the first month. That started it really.
I mean, I love a bit of woo woo, first of all. So very on board with this intuitive reading. It's so funny. I feel like I've been casually like inviting in my life. I'm like, hello, medium, like, please turn up. Like, can I, I need the right person here. And I'm like, is it that? No, I couldn't get an appointment with that. Can't be that person. So I think, getting a little bit of intuitive guidance every now and then is really valuable just to like get yourself out of the logical brain, particularly if you're somebody who's quite strategic. I really battle with not being like the overthink strategy. Like, yeah, but what does that ladder up to? And how does that go off here? Like, so that could be actually quite nice to just change the inputs of perspective on that, but also just that ease in, what you talked about, that guidance that you'll be able to create this with ease. And then, finding the right person to teach you the right way to approach the platform and then giving you that piece of advice that just allows everything to unlock. Like, we do so much uphill battle in business. Like, it is so normal for every single one of us. So then when we find those little glimmers of ease where we can move through and start to open up some doors and make things happen, like, what a gift for that to happen and to be able to just go with it and run with it.
100%. And I think I also thought it's sort of now or never, Lucy. Like, I'm not in that golden handcuffs of having that regular client salary coming in. I do get a bit of an income through my Adobe Express ambassador work. I do have a little bit of an income through my regular teaching work that I do for universities and creative accelerators. It's not every month, but there's a few that I've had for a few years now. So I know that I've got times of year where I've got bookings there. So it wasn't a complete, okay, it's this or nothing. I also refer a lot of clients on to old agencies. So sometimes I get a kickback or referral fees. So I have my other sort of income strands ticking me over, but really I am going all in on growing this. And I just thought all I need to commit to is doing my one email a week. And that's it. And actually, it isn't just that, because a lot of the job is actually promoting and talking to the community. And when I started, I had what I called the Power 100. So I contacted the first 100 people individually to ask them what they were working on, what were their challenges, how could I help them? And they actually gave me all the content ideas. So I have a huge list in my editorial schedule of stuff that they're struggling with. I haven't managed to message everybody as it's grown, but that's my sort of desire is I do have more childcare in place, I regularly like download the paid list and try and make sure I give every single person a bit of love in some way, even if it's just sharing one of their articles or talking to them on social media, even if I don't get that in-depth chat with them. And my youngest child doesn't start preschool until September 2026. So I'm like, okay, you've got until then to try and make it into something that could be a proper salary. So it's sort of like I'm starting it out as I guess a new business.
I think one of the most underrated journeys that we go on is building from scratch. I think particularly when so many of us and yourself like included in this, but I generalize a little bit because there are so many of us who do this, like having to build in public when metrics are visible, when you can look at, is it number of followers, or is it number of subscribers, or is it there's so much of what we do that's visible. I'm quite lucky with podcasting because data is private. It's all behind, like no
It's
one.
very smoke and mirrors, isn't it?
Except for the charts, which I'm always angling for, and always, trying to grow in. And I do shout it from the rooftops whenever we pop up in there. But it's kind of hidden. But there's other aspects, of course, which are not. From your LinkedIn profile, your Instagram profile, like right through into Substack as well. Those vanity metrics are so obvious to everybody else and can be so like stifling as the creator trying to grow something, knowing everything starts from nothing. Like we all start from no clients, we all start from no followers, no listeners, so no subscribers. But doing that publicly is a whole other kettle of fish. Like, how are you managing that emotionally, like all aspects?
It's funny. I actually had a bit of a wrestle with my ego at the weekend, and I actually wrote an article about how I've never been smaller, but most of the time I'm happy with it, which is in majority true. But there are also those moments where you see somebody on the platform and they're like, oh, I've got 100,000 subscribers. Do you want to come and teach for free for my audience? And then I think, no, but hold on. Where's your audience from? Where did you grow it from? Because you can import a data list into Substack. And there's definitely, like there is on every platform, there's like the bro growth hackers, which I'm not, that it's very obvious they're in like little pods and I'm kind of not in the clique. I've sort of been invited into the clique. And it's that thing of like, oh, it's like the cool kids at school again. Like I feel like I should be there, but I know it's not actually good for me. And I need to just be the geek in the library with my head down and I will be better in the long run. But of course, when somebody with huge follower numbers invites you to do something for free for them, you think, oh, maybe I should just sell my soul and not get any sleep to stay up late at night to work in your American time zone so I can maybe give all of my audience to you because your audience doesn't fit for me.
Because yours is real.
Yeah, exactly. No, there's definitely that piece. And also I recently put my price up and I had a real wobble, which was objectively, I can coach myself and say, that's ridiculous, Lucy. But I know the average spend for a Substack subscription is between £5 to £6. But that average is really based on writers, like people who are just doing creative written work. I don't know what the average spend is for business subscriptions, but it's the business category that I play in. It's the business leaderboard that I want to climb up. And on there, you've got everything from in the thousands to a several hundred. And so I felt actually 20 quid a month or £150 a year, you'll have to do the dollar, Australian and American dollar equivalent.
Everything's just double or triple for us, unfortunately.
It's not that much for the value that I'm giving. And I know that I have that confidence to know that. Like I would charge maybe 100 or a few hundred just to have a workshop with me. And now, aside from the weekly newsletter, I either host a workshop or I bring a guest in every single month. And the last workshop was like how to get paid to write an article for a UK publication. And 8 of them have already got paid to do that. The one before was how to get paid as a speaker. So they're all of a sudden commanding more in speaker fees. Or we had another one on how to teach workshops better. So some of them are now doubling the time of a workshop. Before they were only asking for an hour. Now they're saying, no, I want to teach for 2 or 3 hours, which means, again, they can put their fees up. So for most of the people in there, I'm never going to be that sleazy salesperson that's like, I can increase your double, triple your revenue overnight. But I do know that I can help them find alternative income streams as they are raising their profile. So for me, that's not a huge price as a business expense to pay annually. But I know since I put the price up, I've got that confidence wobble in selling it against the audience on Substack. And then it's like a question of, am I on the right platform? But actually, most of my subscribers I'm importing in. So what I've realized is I don't need to get caught up in that Substack clique and be trying to grow on Substack. What I need to be doing is actually speaking to people like you or other people who have that audience match with me, where that is a no-brainer business expense for them to learn how to upskill in their business, rather than maybe a writer who is on Substack and is like, I struggle to even pay £5 a month. I definitely can't afford £20 a month for you. Then it's 100% not for them. But since I put that price increase up, obviously the numbers have lowered because it's not as an affordable price point for the Substack audience. So when you look at the graph, you're like, you're plateauing, babe. But it's not the real graph, because actually when you look at revenue, since I've put the price hike up, the revenue graph, it's like I've made more in the last 6 weeks quicker than in the sort of 7 months prior. So it's having to have a word with myself that just getting more followers doesn't mean anything if they're not paying. And it's better to have less followers, I think, with more people paying than a bigger follower number and more people paying less.
There are two truths about us business owners that both me and our incredible show partner Card Dog Gift know to be true. The first one is that we are some of the most generous humans on the planet. Maybe that's because we regularly have to push ourselves into uncomfortable spaces, learn to problem solve like crazy, and through all of that we realise how impactful the generosity of others is. Whether that's people who've supported us directly through free advice and guidance, or indirectly by sharing their story and learnings on this pod. The second thing I know is we're also often stretched on time and headspace. So whether you struggle to find the perfect gift for your friends and family, have a last minute special occasion that you're not feeling ready for, or want to say thank you to your clients, team members or support team and still make it personal, Card Dog Gift have got you, and here is how. You can get physical or digital gift cards for retailers like Adore Beauty, Apple, Netflix, Uber and more, like 150 plus more. They have beautiful designs on the cards and support local artists by featuring their designs. Love that. You can get a Visa, MasterCard or EFTPOS gift card, which honestly just provides endless good feels for those you give it to. I personally love being able to get exactly what I want, or just get myself some silly little treats like an overpriced smoothie and say a silent thank you to the human who gifted it to me. And you can even get hyper personal with them, with a custom photo, a heartfelt message, or even a video message. And lastly, Card Dog Gift are the loveliest of teams. From their co-founder Nick to their marketing team of Lexi and Tash down in Melbourne, they're hardworking and care about what they do, and I value their support of this show so much, as it helps me to keep supporting you to thrive. So next time you're being generous, type Card Dog Gift into Google and thank me later. Couldn't agree more. And I'm quite grateful to hear it said in that way. I think, there has been thankfully, a very slow cultural shift that's been happening. And particularly, perhaps I live in an echo chamber because I have a few fantastic people in my network and in my algorithm who are like, if someone is selling you the dream that they can make you, $100,000 launch happen in, after just taking this one free webinar and then spending $2,000 on their course, like, red flags, red flags. So I definitely live in that echo chamber of people saying that, which I'm grateful for. But it does feel like at large we're thankfully getting a little bit more suspicious over seeing these, like you say, like and comment cliques of, creators who post something and then you see the same people commenting all the time, or you see pages just all of a sudden on Instagram go from 3,000 followers to 5,000 very quickly, but no content's been published. And, you start to get a little bit more suspicious about, hang on a minute here, like how much of this is real? How much of this is authentic? And how does that truly sit with the person behind it? Like, I don't think I could ever be a person who looks at my business and goes, great, like, look, I've just hit, 20,000 people on Instagram because I bought them. Or, I've just hit 100,000 downloads on that last episode because I've paid for downloads. All of these things are possible to buy, but how do you feel good about it ever?
100%. And I feel the same for that. That happens a lot in the PR world as well. you see these, like, you might have had them already, where you get these kind of people in your DMs being like, do you want to be featured on Forbes or Yahoo or
Mhm.
whatever it is? And like, you can pay per article. And I'm like, that's not PR. That's really scuzzy advertising and should be marked as such. And I even had a PR mentoring client who was like, oh, I've paid 3,000 to be in Forbes. And I was like, no, it's completely illegal. And it was like a backhanded deal with a contributor. And then I looked at their profile and I got one of my friends who's a senior contributor to look it up. All the contributors are in a list and they weren't getting any reach on any of their articles. They were just getting all these people to write the articles for themselves. They were basically like adverts for themselves and then taking the money. And this person was maybe getting 30 views on the article just to get their name in Forbes.
Gosh, that is so scary, isn't it? Like, we are so vulnerable as well in this gig, like as small business owners or founders or whatever. You're so taught over and over again that being able to say featured on Forbes, getting certain awards, and there's so many of these deals going on. But trying to be an authentic person with an authentic voice that is able to make real revenue is really challenging in this world of like noisy people and people selling false dreams. And particularly it's difficult in this gig, like the gig that you've chosen, to stay creatively motivated around all of that, to like keep pumping out quality content, which, like, as a fellow content creator, of which I'm not a huge fan of that term, but when you produce a podcast, I am a content creator. I'm also a writer and all these things, but I'm doing content, right? And it's good, but it's such a slog to get it done. How do you stay creatively motivated every day?
I promote every day, like every single day. Like, I rarely take a day off from promoting, but it's not always in the way that you think. So like today, I'm recording this episode with you. That's one. That's my promotional activity. But then when the podcast comes out, it's like, obviously, this is why it's always a good idea to interview PR people as well. PS. Like, then
Noted.
then they will always promote the episode to all of their audience. So for me at the moment, my promotion will look like trying to collect the wins from my audience and put that into a spreadsheet so I can share that. It's collecting the testimonials. It's sharing the article of what I've just written. I tend to use whoever's in my monthly as a way to kind of get people externally, because they might want to come in just for the live. So then it's like reminding people of this is who's coming up this month, this is who's coming up in the next few months, in case you want to come annually rather than just monthly. My biggest audience is probably on Instagram. So I use Instagram stories a lot just to remind people what's there. And I think the biggest shift for me is not thinking about it as selling, but thinking about it as somebody could be sat there with no idea how to promote themselves, or don't know how to get on a podcast. They don't know what their story is. They don't have the confidence. And my service is a really affordable way to help them do that. And if I don't talk about it, they won't know. And it's the same for a lot of people that I work with. I'm like, no one is going to know that you do garden mentoring, or that you're a copy editor, or that you do an SEO agency, or you can make killer emails for people if you don't tell them. So I just have to kind of think of it as, no, this is like my service and my calling. And I don't know if you found this in your world, but quite often I will sometimes get prompted by people when there's something political happening to comment on it. And I'll say like, but my activism is championing the small business owner and getting good independence out there, because that's how I think I will leave the world in a better place. That's my calling. That's what I'm good at. That's my like daily activism, is to get the good people out there. So if I don't tell them how I do that, I can't do that. And it doesn't necessarily look the same as being very political and sharing, content of things that I believe in on my feed all the time. But it's my way that I know that I'm good at, of making the world a better place.
I really love the way that you talk about promoting yourself. And, I don't know if you meant to, but I clocked that you didn't use the term self-promotion in that, but it's about promoting. Like, it's such a funny thing. And I know we talked about this off air, but that inability that we have to talk about ourselves, that like inbuilt block that just comes up. Personally, I have seen this in podcasting so much. I create these episodes for people to hear about their story. It's such a valuable gift to hear about somebody's business journey for every business owner who gets to tune in, whether they're in the same industry or not. Just hearing other people's experiences is so valuable. And it's such a gift to share your story in that way. But And then when it comes to promoting the episode, they just don't. It's like what you'll see as a podcast host is, a story share. They wait for you to post it on the page for the show or whatever platform. And then it's a quick share, a 24-hour story, and then it's gone. And I think you have just spent so much time showing the world your brain and your insight. And you have this ability to like use that as a platform to be like, want to learn more about this? Go to here. It just seems like such a logical opportunity for someone. But I've seen it over and over. I've interviewed 125 business owners in the last 2.5 years, and I see it over and over again. And it's just that holding themselves back from really sharing like the goal that they just shared in an episode. And I don't know whether it's because they're nervous to promote themselves or they feel like it's, the podcast is like benefiting. I'm not sure what it is, but it's a really funny experience.
You're not the first podcast host to tell me this. So it's definitely a podcast host pandemic. And I would say that I do think a lot of it comes from people feeling self-conscious and they don't know how to share it without saying, look at me, I'm on a podcast. So I think sometimes it's easier when there's maybe a video teaser because they can sort of maybe share the teaser. One of the things that I do, sometimes even to my own detriment, is I overshare how I've got somewhere. Like I don't believe in kind of the gatekeeping. So I will share with everybody, not just what I do for my clients, but also for myself. So one of the ways that I could mitigate that anxiety of being like, oh, I'm on Kim's podcast today. It could be like, this is why appearing on podcasts is good. I was on Louis Grenier's podcast, and following that, Kim, who was a listener, messaged me to say how much she loved the episode and invited me onto hers. So it's already snowballed and got me another podcast opportunity in Australia, which is going to help me reach a completely different audience. And I could show like the benefit of this is how it's happened, as opposed to I'm on Kim's podcast. So for me, one of the easiest ways to share a win is actually to send the lift back down to your audience and show them how you got there. How did you put that award entry together? How did you discover what the submission guidelines were? Who maybe helped you put it together? How did you get that speaker opportunity? What did you learn on stage? How did you feel before you went on stage versus how it was afterwards? I think all of these things are quite relatable. And I always call it like showing a bit of ankle, like it's giving us that pinch of personality, but it's not your knicker drawer, like just a bit to give us a little bit of who you are. And it makes you so much more relatable. And ultimately, that is what the promotion's about. It's not about, look how great I am. It's, if you want to learn DIY PR, there's a million of us out there. But now you know who I am, you're probably going to think of me more and want to work with me versus Jane next door. I don't know who Jane is. I just made her up. I do actually know a Jane in PR. She's great. But
and Jane wouldn't know your name. She would call you your dog's name if Jane met you.
100%. There's actually in the book that I wrote like with my husband, he gave us like example about like if you had a butcher's shop and then another butcher's shop came and put their prices lower, like your only option might seem like, well, then you've got to put your prices even lower. Or you just show more of your face as the owner of the butcher shop and talk about why it's a family business and how you started it, get yourself sort of out there. So I think that's why for me, I do push that personal brand thing on business owners. And I'm like, don't just talk about the work. Do talk about your values, why you work with the clients you work with, why you care about the work that you're doing, how you choose your guests, all of those things, because it's what sets you apart and makes you more memorable. And that's ultimately why people will emotionally connect with you and have that feeling about you to want to work with you.
Super valuable. I love that. I've got a million post-its surrounding me. I know my listeners will know that. I talk about them all the time. Like I just put shit on a post-it just because I know like later, like that'll remind me of something later, and show a bit of ankle is going onto a post-it after this because I absolutely love that. And I can remember that and recall that analogy perfectly. So thank you for that.
You're very welcome.
I want to shift gears just a little bit and talk about numbers and goals and success measures, because I think it's a place where we get so tripped up as business owners. Like we set these lofty goals, back to this like 100,000 followers and $1 million months and all of these things that are just so far away. It just feels so impossible all the time. And I have seen through doing my research of you and learning a little bit more about your story that you've set yourself a public goal to reach 1,001 paid subscribers. Can you tell me why you came to that number and how that journey has been for you?
Yeah. So if you hit like 101 subscribers on Substack, you get the little white orange box with an orange tick. And once you cross over 1,000, but it has to be like 1,001. It's not just like 1,000. You get the orange tick box with the white tick. So that is very, very much a vanity metric. But when I started out, I guess I was putting pen to paper on the mathematics of, at that time, I was doing £5 a month. And so I was doing the maths on like £5 a month times 1,000 and then multiplying it, taking off my Substack cut, my Stripe cut, my tax cut, and then being like, yeah, I could probably manage on that as a salary 2 days a week of childcare. Like that seems good. As it went on, I was like, okay, I don't think I'm going to do 1,001 in my first year. I'm going to stretch it out to when my daughter starts creche. But really, I guess in the back of my head, I have the public goal because I like to have something to reach for and it's to hold me accountable. But I probably have a different number that's private of what I'd really like to hit. And the other thing I'm not doing at the moment is I have a very basic membership tier, which is, it's a flat fee for everybody. At some point, you can put like a second tier on top. So at some point, I might do a bit more of a bespoke tailored service that's a bit more hands-on, where maybe I'm doing a bit more for you, but I don't have the capacity right now. Like I only have just started getting 2 days a week childcare, and that's going to stop. And then I'm going to have an 8-week French school summer holiday. So for me, I'm just like very mindful of not burning out and overstretching myself and giving myself time. The other thing is I do want to write more books. So I want to give myself space to write more. And obviously I have the teaching work and I do private kind of consulting, like PR mentoring sessions as well. So I want to make sure I have space for those too. So I definitely I would love to hit like what the agency turnover was doing when it was an agency without having the team and still being able to be part-time. But the hardest job for me now is patience, because it's not, even that first 100 is very easy for me. Like kind of when you were saying earlier about the authenticity piece, I didn't just get 100 people in a month. I knew all of those people. I'd worked with them before in some way. They'd bought my book 4 years ago. They've been followers of me on Instagram for years. That's not 100 in a month. That's 100 in a month from 5 years of audience growth. So I fully disillusionarily believe, disillusionary? Is that a word?
It is now.
In a disillusional manner, I fully believe I will hit 1,001, but I also need to like manage my own ego and capacity. I'm not going to be able to do that in 1 month or 3 months, because I think it takes time to build that momentum. And my job now that I've got more capacity is not to up how much I write. It's to spend more time promoting the content and spend more time with that existing audience to get them to have a great time there so that they do well. And ultimately, like if I can get everybody there getting something, like one podcast, one piece of press coverage, one increase in a speaker fee, that's the goal. So if I can get 1,000 people doing that, well, if they were agency clients, I would need a huge team and a huge office to make a difference. Whereas to be able to just sat individually and help 1,000 people do that feels sort of amazing. And to be honest, I don't really aspire to be much bigger than that, because at that point, I probably would have to bring other people in with me to manage the community, and they would have to be PR experts to give the tailored advice, unless I clone myself in AI. So yeah, the real trick is having the plan and sitting tight and not wobbling like I did at the weekend on the days when the graph goes down or the paid numbers go down. My churn rate at the moment is like 85%, which I think is pretty good for a newsletter subscription. I don't know what the average is out there, but if you want to know, that's my stat. And yeah, like I said, 50% of that's coming from off platform, completely off the Substack platform at the moment. So I just need to focus on where they're coming from and keep the quality of the content up and just take my time, which as business owners is horrific, because we just want to do it tomorrow. Right? I go to bed sometimes secretly fantasizing I'm going to go viral by telling my story on TikTok, and then I'll hit 1,000 paid people by tomorrow. And then I look on the app the next morning when I wake up and I'm like, I've lost 3 subscribers overnight.
Oh my God. Literally my experience every day on either Instagram, TikTok, or this podcast.
So yeah, it's just having that faith of keeping it growing. And actually, like when I started promoting myself, I had kind of a dream list of publications or people I wanted to work with. And to be honest, I hit that list over time. And so now I'm like, I kind of need to set these bigger goals for myself. And often when we meet these kind of business owners that are amazing, they all started kind of nowhere, also with no followers, and had to build it from scratch. And we only see the success. We don't see the bit when they're a nobody. You know, like I got quite a lot of respect for Chris Do and how he started his YouTube channel at 41. And, you know, now it's got millions of people, but it took him years to get to that point. And he also had his whole agency behind him, helping him to like edit and put it together. Whereas I'm like, okay, it's just me doing it. Even if I hit like a percentage of that and just be, you know, the PR, the self-promotion, grow your brand, get it out there, I'll help you do it person for a slither. I only need like 1,000 solopreneurs to come with me. Like I can do that.
I absolutely love that as a success measure, and always about giving that value. Like it helps us in those dark, wobbly moments. It's like, what value am I providing? It's so important. I noticed something that you posted a little while ago. Now, I can't quite remember which year this was, but you know, you mentioned before about ego and that battle, that like the internal battle that we have. It was relative to Khan.
Oh yeah.
And seeing your colleagues, you know, down the road from you, essentially at this incredible festival, you know, either being honored or just like being in the glitz and glamour that is Cannes, and getting those experiences. Like if, you know, you're in media marketing, advertising, you know, I've been watching it on LinkedIn being like, holy shit, look at that Pinterest party with their little like make your own crocs and stuff. Like, what is this? Absolute, you know, fantastic stuff. But you had talked about battling with that feeling of being comfortably in your own environment and building your own thing, but then also seeing people that you used to work with and that kind of glitz and glamour of it all. Can you talk to me a little bit more about that feeling and how you lifted yourself out of that?
Do we have another hour to do the therapy session on that?
Literally, it's just therapy for me because I feel the same thing. Seeing, you know, friends in big jobs doing big things.
You know, it was the same week as in the UK. There was also a big small business conference. So it was like my whole feed was like my old life. So everyone from the creative agency world down the road, including my husband. And then like my new world, which I guess is like my kind of solopreneur world, all at this small business conference. And some which there is definitely an increase in solopreneurs at the Cannes Lions now. So there was this sort of weird medley of like, it just felt like everybody I knew was at something and I was sat at home. And there was a few things in that moment. One was, as I was at my computer that day, I was talking to various people in my community our last live was with a journalist teaching them how to pitch this column. And 8 of them in the first fortnight got commissions. So I had a whole bunch of them wanting to just run their articles through me or check their pictures or check what they'd said. So I was sat at home looking at this view of the mountains and the lake, which, you know, I have now, which also is this insane like lifestyle to have, responding to this new audience that I've got in a really joyful way. And I'm terrible at recording it, but most days I do get, and I'm sure you get it as well. And then you disregard it where someone goes, love this episode. And you're like, oh, cool. I've got to go to the loo, and you move on to the next thing. And actually like every day someone's like, oh, I just did this, or I just connected with this person, or I just did this, you know, and it's this like sort of weird, these little droplets of success. But because I hadn't been at my laptop for a few days, I suddenly got this kind of shower of everybody doing really well. And I just thought, if I wasn't here doing this, these things wouldn't be happening for these people, some of whom are creating like the most incredible things, like amazing books or services or products. And so there's sort of this feeling, it's quite addictive when you work in PR, of like when you get something in print. Like when I was a junior, you'd literally like run up to the boss being like, look, I got the client in print. Woo! And that feeling doesn't go. Like even now, if you get yourself or your client in print, you're still like, it's print. But even just getting these messages being like, I've got myself, you know, a backlink, I've done this. It was the most amazing feeling. So there's me like going, my ego wants to be at these 2 conferences. But unless I literally stand there handing out flyers to my newsletter, it's not really going to be benefiting my business. It's just going to look really sexy on my Instagram or my LinkedIn to show that I was there. Versus what I am doing right now is spending time with my community, which is ultimately going to help my business grow. And I think it's that constant like juxtaposition of like, what is actually growing my business versus what looks cool. And I've fallen into that trap so many times, which is why when you asked me that question, I was like, I can't always answer it, because I have sometimes maybe written an article for somebody else that I've later regretted because I thought I've only done that because you had a big follower base. And now actually I'm not sure we're aligned on values. Or I've done a podcast or I've appeared on stage on a panel with other people and afterwards reflected and thought that actually wasn't a very good, representation of people that I would want to be seen sat alongside. So I really do try and stick to a list now of like, these are my values. Does that outlet match that? And I also have a list of people I don't want to work with, just to remind me to not get ego led into just saying yes to everything. But I think it's a constant journey. I think everybody gets that FOMO. Also, just to be real, like this is not the time of my life. I have 3 children under the age of 6 in a new country where I'm trying to learn a new language and set up a new business. Historically, when I was in London and it was, a 20-minute taxi ride and my husband was working for me and I was center stage, I could go here, there and everywhere because I had him at home. But now he's taking center stage for a bit and we're swapping roles. And that's also a bit of a bitter pill for me to swallow. So I'm like, I'm the main carer now. Like it's always been shared. So I'm now like, I'm actually much more in this traditional motherhood role where I'm the primary carer. And it's not going to be for a huge amount of time that I will be needed in that way. And I think there's always this fear of like, we have to grow now, my career, blah, blah. I'm like, actually, it will still be there. And even if it takes me 10 years to grow the newsletter to 1001, I will get there unless I decide I really need to sack it off and get a job again. So it's a very long and discombobulated answer of all of my kind of thinking around it, really. So there's not one takeaway tip I can give to you. I think it's just something that we all feel if we're parents or we're in that sandwich generation or we're dealing with our own illnesses and trying to do that juggle. Sometimes we have to sacrifice something. And for me right now, showing up at things is the bit that I have to sacrifice. But I find that decision easier when I realize it's my choice rather than I can't do it.
So much of this gig that we do is about the reframe, isn't it? It's that whatever inclination we've been taught to approach a situation with, whether it be from long corporate careers, them becoming the founder, and how we have to shift how we think and how we approach, to completely pivoting careers and then trying not to approach it in the same way as we approach the other. So much of this gig is about reframe and is also about recognizing our personalness. That's another word we can just make up, but our personalness as part of it and the growth we experience as individuals, and just starting to figure out what's important to us and what's valuable, and when our ego is talking and when it's yelling at us because we're feeling shame, or when it's actually just a very ungentle reminder to go, hey, look at how much amazing stuff you're doing here. This is your chance to reflect on that and look at it in a different way. I just think this journey of building your own business, whatever it looks like, is just the most powerful personal growth exercise we can possibly put ourselves through, because we have to bring up all that dark shit and all of that rubbish and work through it to find our way through. So I actually think it's a perfect answer and a perfect reflection, because so much of it is actually bundled in together. Like we can't separate self from the work, from the everything else, and from all the lessons. So I think it's a perfect answer.
Thank you.
Now, clearly, I want the listener to go and check all of your offerings out because, like I said, I was so excited to get you on the show because I just think you obviously have so much to share to small business owners and to founders and to my audience to help them grow, which is 100% what this show is for. That the statistics around business failure are absolutely abhorrent. And I need as much encouragement as I can to keep like going on random tangents and building whatever I want to build myself as well. And, that's what this show, that's where it came from. I needed some help. And also now all my audience, I need to serve them as well, and the listener. And, it's all about keeping ourselves in business and keeping as many many of us in business and growing as we can. So yes, I clearly want the listener to go and check your offerings out, become a subscriber, become a paid subscriber. And if, that's not possible right now, soak in as much as you can until you can become a paid subscriber. So I'm going to make sure to have all of the links and all of the things in the show notes as a listener comes to expect from me. There is many a link in the show notes to go and check out. But aside from all of that, because it is such a gift to share your knowledge and your journey in the way that you have, how can I support you? How can the listener support you to grow?
Do you know what? I think outside of, buying a subscription or buying my books, actually leaving book reviews. And you probably are the same on your podcast, like leave a review because it helps the people externally to just see it. And it's just a great brand building tool. It takes like 2 minutes. So actually, I'm going to do a call to action to your listeners listening to this episode today. If you liked it, to do a positive review because it all just helps the good people get out there in the world and leave it a little better place.
I thank you. That's very kind of you. I am so passionate about reviews. I think I'm actually like top starred on Google Maps now as well for I just leave reviews for every small business restaurant I go to, for every if I'm at a hairdresser, if I'm getting anything I'm getting done, I'm review, positive review, because social proof is just so important.
Because we only do it when we complain as well. There's quite often a thing that you only ever see negative stuff on TripAdvisor, especially if you're in France. And it's because nobody goes, oh yeah, I'm going to share the great experience. We only complain. So yeah, sharing positive reviews, the best thing. And also I think back to your piece as well, if somebody enjoys one of your podcast episodes, actually, if you can bear it to talk about it in your stories or to do more than just a post or just reshare a podcast post, because when we hear somebody else speak effervescently about something, that will actually make us want to consume it more than just a reshare.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. In this gig in particular, my other side job is building podcasts for brands. And my side job, it's that's my job. It's my business. But
my whole career.
That's my business. And something I spent 15 years on, very good. But, is building pods for brands. And it's everyone wants that silver bullet. How do I get it out there? It's no, literally, you just need other people to talk about it. You need to, word of mouth. It never gets more technical than that. People need to talk about things and people need to talk about the content that they care about to help it reach other people. And there's no algorithm in podcasting. I'm sure the algorithm in Substack isn't the most amazing thing either. So it's getting yourself out there. That's the only way it works. So I couldn't agree more. And it is a wonderful, wonderful gift that you've just given me to say that too. So thank you so much for all of the time that we've spent together. Sorry, my screen just flipped over Norton. I don't know if you have Norton security on you're probably a Mac user, so you don't have it. But all of a sudden you just disappeared from my screen.
Oh, you're probably a Mac user.
Well, I figured with Adobe, you're probably really good.
Yeah, I am a Mac user.
I'm a really basic PC galley, and I have Norton security pop up all the time, interrupting my life. And it just happened again.
That is your social media post today, to be I'm a basic PC girly and bloody Norton's at my door again.
Literally, they are the best upseller in the business. So you disappeared from me for a moment, but just want to say thank you again for spending this time with me today,
thank you.
Sharing your journey. I've loved every second of it. I'm so grateful for it. So thanks for being here.
Oh, honestly, no, thank you.
Thank you for listening to Unemployed and Afraid, the podcast for small business builders with your host, me, Kim Curtin. If you love it, you can say thanks with a star rating and a review. And of course, join the community on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Find us at Unemployed and Afraid wherever you're hanging out, and I'll see you there.